The storm that broke the axle of his cart was just the first minor incident that did not foreshadow trouble. The real storm broke later, when Caleb realized that the stranger who had pulled him out of the mud was only a harbinger of his own, far more terrible end, and that his name, once engraved in a blacksmith's shop, was now on the most terrifying list. A list where his name would be the last. The storm arrived without warning, as if the sky itself had split its seams and spilled every ounce of winter onto the narrow King's Road. Rain needled down in silver streaks, hissing against the ruts and puddles, while wind clawed through the pine trees that lined the muddy track. Caleb Aldridge hunched his shoulders inside a coat that had once belonged to someone larger and someone warmer, fingers already numb around the cracked leather reins. His cart, little more than 2 wheels and a prayer, limped behind a bony mare whose ribs heaved like broken bellows. Every rut jarred his teeth. Every gust threatened to rip the patched canvas awning clean off its frame. Then the axle snapped. The sound was a wet, splintering crack, followed by the lurch of the world tilting sideways. Caleb shouted, half curse, half plea, as the cart listed hard to the right, dragging the mare round in a skidding half-circle. Momentum hurled crates of hand-forged hinges and iron nails into the muck. One lid burst. Nails scattered like startled blackbirds. The mare snorted white steam and tried to bolt, but Caleb flung himself forward, planting his boots against the slanted footboard, hauling the reins in until the bit jangled against her teeth. Easy, girl. Easy. His voice cracked like thin ice. For a heartbeat, the only sounds were the rain drumming on canvas and the mare's frantic breathing. Then a second set of hoofbeats approached. A slow, deliberate clop-clop that somehow cut through the storm's roar. Caleb looked up, blinking water from his lashes, and saw a rider cloaked in black, hood pulled low so only a narrow strip of pale face showed beneath. The stranger's horse was no grand destrier, just a rangy bay with rain-slick flanks, but it moved with calm purpose, as if the weather were no more than a mild inconvenience. The rider reined in and sat motionless. No greeting, no question, only the creak of wet leather and the soft snort of the bay. Caleb swallowed. Axle's gone. Could use a hand if you've a mind. A pause, long enough for doubt to curl cold in his gut. Then the stranger dismounted with fluid grace, boots sinking ankle-deep in mud. The hood never lifted. Long fingers, thin and ink-stained, drew a short iron pry-bar from a saddle loop. Without a word, the stranger knelt beside the ruined wheel, probing the splintered wood with the same care a healer might use on a broken bone. Caleb hovered, useless. Shame pricked him sharper than the rain. He was 17, apprenticed to a smith who taught him pride in strength and precision. Yet here he stood, helpless as a child. He crouched to gather the scattered nails, but his cold-numbed fingers fumbled, and the small iron points kept slipping from his grasp. "Leave them," the stranger said, voice low, gentle, oddly hollow beneath the hood. "They'll wait." So Caleb waited. Rain soaked through coat and shirt alike, tracing icy rivulets down his spine. The stranger worked in silence. Lever, twist, splinter, curse under breath that smelled faintly of cloves. A spare spoke was produced from somewhere inside the cloak, trimmed with a small knife that flashed silver and disappeared just as quickly. Each motion was economical, practiced, as though the stranger had mended 100 wheels on 100 lonely roads. 10 minutes, maybe 20. Time blurred beneath the storm's roar. When the stranger straightened, the wheel stood true again. A single drop of blood, bright as holly berry, welled on the stranger's fingertip, mixing with rainwater before it vanished into the mud. Caleb found his voice. I've no coin to pay you. Only these hinges. They're good iron, forged last week." The stranger raised a hand, palm outward. "A cart that rolls is payment enough." Caleb's cheeks burned hotter than the cold deserved. "Then at least take my name so I can thank you proper when fortune finds me again. I'm Caleb Aldridge, apprentice to Master Hob the Smith in Dunlow." The hood tilted. Beneath its shadow, Caleb caught a glimpse of eyes, pale, almost colorless, flecked with gold like candlelight on frost. "Names travel farther than coins," the stranger murmured. "Keep yours close. You may need it. Before Caleb could protest, the stranger pressed something small and warm into his numb palm. A wooden cross, no longer than his thumb, carved from dark walnut and rubbed smooth by countless touches. The grain swirled like storm clouds. "For safe passage," the stranger said, already turning away. "And for the road ahead." Caleb stared, mouth open. The cross felt heavier than its size, as if it carried not just wood but memory. When he looked up, the stranger was already mounted, cloak flapping like raven's wings. The bay horse turned without command and vanished into the mist and rain, hoofbeats swallowed by wind. Only then did Caleb realize he had never learned the stranger's name. He tucked the cross inside his shirt, against his skin, where it pulsed with borrowed warmth. The mare stamped restlessly. The cart creaked but held. Caleb climbed back onto the bench, gathered the reins, and clicked his tongue. As the wheels began to turn again, he cast one last glance down the empty road. Somewhere beyond the veil of rain, thunder rumbled like distant drums, and for the first time in his short, hard life, Caleb felt the weight of something vast and unseen shifting around him. The storm was not done, he realized. It had only just begun. Caleb crested the hill above Dunlow at sunset, expecting the warm glow of forge fires and the smell of peat smoke. Instead, the valley lay under a bruised sky, and the village square was a churning mass of torches and shouting. Soldiers ringed the old oak. Red sashes, iron helms, the king's own hawk blazoned on their sleeves. Beneath the oak, a scaffold stood new-built, pale pine still weeping sap. He reined in so hard the mare squealed and reared. The cross thumped against his breastbone, suddenly cold. A sergeant with a voice like cracked brass bellowed the charge. Treason, sedition, conspiracy to aid heretics. The condemned, hands bound, head bowed, was Caleb Aldridge. Not a mistake. His own name, flung into the dusk like a curse. They dragged him from the saddle before he could kick free. Hands rough as bark seized his arms. The mare's reins were sliced. Torchlight spilled across faces he had known since childhood. Mara the baker, eyes wide with horror. Old Willem the cooper, turning away. The captain read the warrant aloud, every word a hammer blow. Caleb Aldridge, apprentice smith, accused of forging weapons for rebels. Evidence. A seal-stamped letter found in Master Hobbs' ledger, bearing his scrawl. A lie wrapped in red wax. They shoved him toward the scaffold. The steps groaned under his weight. Rope fibers rasped against a noose already dark with someone else's sweat. Panic clawed his throat. He tasted iron, rain, and the sour ghost of last night's ale. Somewhere below, a child wailed, and the sound shredded the last of his composure. The hangman's hood turned toward him, featureless as night. Caleb's knees buckled. The rope slipped over his head, coarse fibers biting his skin. Time collapsed into heartbeats, 3, 4, 5, until the drum roll of his pulse drowned the crowd. Then a voice cut through the noise, quiet as snowfall, yet it silenced every tongue. "Hold!" The captain's head snapped around. A single rider emerged from the torch flare. Black cloak, hood low, the same rangy bay that had once paced beside Caleb's broken cart. The stranger dismounted with the same fluid grace, but now the movement carried authority sharp enough to make soldiers step back. In the rider's gloved hand gleamed a silver seal, the king's own sigil, twin hawks clutching a crown. Torchlight licked across it, turning the metal to liquid fire. The captain's face went slack. The noose around Caleb's throat slackened an inch. "Release him," the stranger said. The hood lifted a fraction, revealing those pale, colorless eyes. Eyes that had studied splintered wood and iron nails in the rain. "By royal writ, this man is under my protection." A parchment followed, unrolled with deliberate slowness. The captain read, lips moving. Color drained from his cheeks like wine from a cracked cup. His sword clattered back into its sheath. Soldiers parted, uncertain, as if the ground itself had shifted beneath their boots. Caleb's legs gave out. He sagged against the scaffold post, rope still draped around his neck, heart battering ribs. The stranger, no, the minister, stepped close enough that Caleb smelled clove and damp wool. "Breathe, lad." The voice was gentle now, almost amused. "We've unfinished roads ahead." Hands worked at the knots. The noose fell away, coiling on the planks like a dead thing. Caleb's wrists burned as circulation returned, but the pain felt exquisite, proof of life. The crowd murmured, a restless sea of disbelief. Somewhere, a torch hissed out in the drizzle. The minister turned to the captain. "The letter was forged. You will find the true traitor in the pay of Lord Harrow. His seal was stolen, his name misused. Spread the word." The captain swallowed, nodded once, and backed away as if the scaffold might bite. Soldiers melted into shadows. Torches guttered. The scaffold stood empty, ropes swaying in the wind like a question mark. Caleb found his voice, cracked and small. "You, how?" The minister pressed the same wooden cross back into his palm. It was warm now, as though it had absorbed the heat of torches and the chill of fear alike. "A wheel once mended must sometimes turn again. Tonight it turned for you. Tomorrow it may turn for others." Sirens of relief threatened to drown him. Tears, he hadn't known he could still cry, ran hot down cheeks stung by cold rain. He clutched the cross like a lifeline. "Come," the minister said, already mounting the bay. "The road is long, and dawn rides fast." Caleb climbed up behind, arms trembling around the minister's waist. As the horse wheeled and clattered out of Dunlow, the scaffold receded into darkness. Behind them, villagers dispersed in whispered knots, and the first pale hint of morning crept over the eastern hills. Pressed against the minister's back, Caleb felt the steady rhythm of the bay's stride and the stranger's heartbeat. Both calm, both unhurried. Somewhere ahead lay safe houses, coded messages, and the thin, dangerous threads of rebellion. Somewhere behind lay a scaffold that had almost claimed him, and a lie still smoldering like coals in the dark. The minister spoke into the wind, voice barely audible above hoofbeats. "Remember, Caleb, every mercy given is a debt owed to the world. We ride to collect." Caleb tightened his grip on the cross, rain and tears indistinguishable now, and for the first time understood that survival was only the prologue. Dawn found them miles from the scaffold, but the rope's phantom burn still ringed Caleb's throat. They had ridden through the night, the bay's hooves drumming a rhythm that pounded straight into Caleb's ribs. When the horse finally stopped, it was in a clearing where the trees grew so thick they swallowed sound. Mist curled knee-high among the ferns. Somewhere a stream murmured like a conspirator. Caleb slid from the saddle, legs buckling, and retched nothing but fear and rain. Father Elias, no longer merely the stranger, knelt beside him, cloak heavy with dew. "Listen," he whispered. Caleb heard only his own pulse. Elias pressed 2 fingers to the boy's carotid, steadying the wild beat until it matched the hush of the forest. Then he spoke low and fast. "There is a war that wears no uniforms, Caleb. The king's prisons swell with women whose only crime was sheltering a priest, with children who recited the wrong psalm. We move them like shadows, one bridge, one barn, one heartbeat at a time. I was headed to Dunlow to fetch a ledger of names. Names now burned because someone betrayed us. You will carry the next list." Caleb's tongue felt thick as bark. "I'm no courier. I mend metal, not lives." Elias drew a small copper cylinder no longer than a finger from his belt and unscrewed the cap. Inside lay a strip of rice paper so thin it trembled in the damp air. "Ink made from soot and gum Arabic," he said. "Invisible until warmed over a candle. 43 souls wait for these scratches to tell them when to run. Every mile you ride, every innkeeper who offers a bed, every false patrol you dodge. Those are hammer blows on the chains that bind them." Caleb stared at the paper as if it might burst into flame. "What if I fail?" Elias's pale eyes held no mercy, only truth. "Then 43 people will learn what the scaffold taught you tonight. Mercy is rare and memory is long." The choice hung between them like a blade. Caleb felt the wooden cross still against his chest, warm now with body heat. He remembered the scaffold's creak, the crowd's breath on his cheek, the minister's hand steady on the bay's reins. He swallowed once, hard, and the word scraped out, "Yes." Immediately Elias moved. From a saddlebag he produced a rough-spun tunic the color of forest floor. A hooded cloak dyed with walnut husks until it drank light. No metal buckles, only bone toggles that would not clink. He stripped Caleb's smith's leathers, burned the king's brand still stitched inside, and dressed him anew. The transformation felt like shedding skin. "Your first task rides tonight," Elias said. "A mother and her 2 daughters 2 leagues east. The younger girl coughs blood. Soldiers search every healer's house. You will lead them to the river crossing at Blackroot Ford where the ferryman owes us a favor." Caleb's stomach lurched. "Tonight? I can't." "You can," Elias cut in, "because you've already seen the alternative." They walked the horse deeper into the trees until the air smelled of moss and secrets. At a fallen oak Elias pressed a knot. A section of bark swung inward, revealing a narrow stair descending into earth. Torches flared below, revealing a cellar lined with straw pallets, crates of dried apples, a single candle whose flame bent in the draft. A woman looked up, eyes swollen from weeping, arms around 2 small girls whose faces were pale as moonlit milk. "This is Caleb," Elias said simply. "He will bring you to the ford before the moon sets." The woman's gaze flicked over his youth, the tremor in his hands, and something steadied behind her exhaustion. She nodded once, as if accepting not him but the necessity that wore his face. They left Elias at the cellar mouth. The woman climbed behind Caleb on the bay. The girls rode double on a second horse, one of Elias's hidden string, led by a silent youth Caleb had never seen. No one spoke. Sound carried in tunnels of pine, and every twig snap sounded like a musket shot. The path wound through ravines where the dark pressed so close Caleb tasted iron on his tongue. Once, distant torchlight bobbed along the ridge. Patrol. He slowed the horses until their breathing was louder than their hooves, until even the owls hushed. When the lights vanished, he nudged the bay forward, sweat freezing beneath his cloak. At Blackroot Ford the river roared, swollen with rain. The ferryman waited, lantern low, face a landscape of scars and secrets. He took the woman's hand without a word, helped the coughing girl aboard. As the raft pushed off, the woman looked back at Caleb across the black water. Her lips moved, no sound, only gratitude shaped like a prayer. Caleb watched until lantern and raft were swallowed by mist. Then he turned the bay toward the next rendezvous, the copper cylinder warm against his ribs, the list of names burning brighter than any forge. Behind him, the forest exhaled. Ahead, the night stretched wide and hungry, and every mile he rode was a promise nailed into the dark. 43 souls, one bridge at a time. They left the ferryman's lantern behind and rode into the teeth of the storm. Thunder rolled low over the hills like distant artillery. Every flash of lightning etched the trees in silver bone. Caleb led, the bay's neck wet velvet beneath his hands, Elias a shadow at his side. The minister had spoken only once since the ford. "We reach the safe barn by moonset. After that, the soldiers will hunt." The path narrowed to a deer track that snaked along the lip of a ravine. Below, water roared, white foam clawing at rocks. Caleb's cloak clung to his back. The copper cylinder pressed against his ribs with each breath, a small hard heart beating secrets. They were halfway across the footbridge, rotted planks swaying over the abyss, when the first arrow hissed past Caleb's ear and shattered on the rail. He jerked the reins. The bay screamed, reared. Another shaft thudded into Elias's saddlebag, quivered like a tuning fork. "Ambush!" Elias's voice cracked like a whip. Shapes burst from the tree-lean 6, maybe 7, red sashes black in the moonlight. King's scouts. Caleb's bowels turned to ice. He hauled the bay around, but the bridge groaned beneath the sudden weight. A plank gave way with a gunshot crack. The mare plunged, forelegs flailing. Caleb kicked free of the stirrups, landed hard on the boards, the impact rattling teeth. Splinters stabbed through his sleeve. Elias had already drawn. Steel whispered free of the scabbard, catching blue-white lightning. He spun the bay to shield Caleb, blade arcing in a lethal crescent. An arrow sliced across his cheek, opening a line of dark blood that looked black in the flash. "Ride through," Elias shouted. But the scouts were on the bridge now, boots drumming. One lunged, spear aimed at Caleb's gut. Caleb snatched the fallen plank, swung it like a club, wood met bone with a sickening crunch. The scout toppled sideways, arms windmilling into the ravine. Another arrow found Elias's left shoulder. He grunted, staggered, but did not drop the sword. Caleb saw the fletching gray goose, same as the ones Elias had taught him to make. Felt the betrayal like a second arrow. One of the scouts screamed, "Take the minister! The boy's nothing." And Caleb understood. They knew exactly who Elias was. He fumbled for the cross beneath his shirt, fingers slipping on wet leather. The wood was warm, no hot, like a coal against his skin. He ripped it free, held it high. The scouts hesitated, half-second superstition, but the moment passed. Steel glinted again. Elias slashed low, hamstringing the nearest attacker. The man shrieked, collapsing, clutching his leg. Another spear jabbed past Elias's guard. The point skated along his ribs, opening wool and flesh alike. Blood bloomed, dark and glossy. Caleb's world narrowed to heartbeat and breath. He ducked a sword swipe, rolled beneath the bay's belly, came up on the far side with Elias's spare dagger clenched in his fist. The blade shook. He steadied it by sheer will. Lightning forked overhead. In the white glare he saw the traitor, Brother Rowan, the acolyte who had served Mass beside Elias for 3 years, face now twisted with greed. Rowan's eyes widened when he recognized Caleb, then narrowed to slits. He raised a short recurved bow, arrow nocked, string drawn to his cheek. "Rowan," Elias rasped, voice thick with pain. "You swore an oath." "Oaths don't pay bounties," Rowan snarled. The arrow loosed. Caleb moved without thought, flung himself sideways. The shaft meant for Elias took him high in the upper arm, tearing muscle, scraping bone. Hot blood soaked his sleeve instantly. The dagger spun from his hand, clattered into the dark. Elias roared, a sound more animal than human. He drove his heels into the bay's flanks. The horse lurched forward, shoulder slamming into Rowan. The bow flew. The two men grappled at the bridge's edge, silhouettes writhing against the storm. Caleb staggered to his feet, left arm numb and useless. The remaining scouts closed. He saw Elias's sword fall, heard the splash far below. Then Elias was on his knees, Rowan's knife at his throat. "Drop the list," Rowan hissed, "or he dies here." Caleb's hand went to the copper cylinder inside his shirt. 43 names. 43 lives balanced on a heartbeat. Elias met Caleb's eyes, steady, sorrowful, unafraid. Blood dripped from his ruined shoulder, pattering onto the boards like slow rain. He shook his head once, almost imperceptible. No. Caleb understood. He pulled the cylinder free. Rowan's gaze fixed on it, greedy and bright. Then Elias moved. With the last of his strength, he drove his head back into Rowan's face. Cartilage crunched. Rowan reeled, knife slicing air. Elias twisted, seized Rowan's wrist, levered the blade toward his own heart. "Run!" he shouted. Caleb ran. He vaulted the fallen scout, boots skidding on blood-slick planks. Arrows hissed past, one tearing through his cloak. The bay thundered beside him, reins trailing. He grabbed a fistful of mane, swung up bareback. Sparks flew as hooves struck stone at the far end of the bridge. Behind him came a cry, not pain, but something fiercer. Caleb did not look back. He bent low over the horse's neck, the wounded arm cradled against his chest, copper cylinder clenched between teeth. The forest swallowed him. Black trunks, lashing branches, rain like thrown gravel. He rode until the horse could run no more, until the storm spent itself and left the world dripping and silent. At a lightning-scarred oak he slid from the saddle, landed on knees that no longer cared. Blood pulsed thick from his arm. The cross was slick with it. Only then did he dare open his fist. The wooden cross was cracked, split clean by the arrow's graze, but intact. In the faint moonlight he saw fresh carvings along the break. Tiny, perfect letters, as if the wood itself had bled words. He pressed it to his lips, tasting iron and walnut and smoke. From somewhere behind, a single owl cried once. Caleb raised his head. The night was not empty. It was listening. He whispered into the dark, voice raw. 43 souls. 1 bridge burned. I finish what you started, Elias. I swear on this blood and this cross. Then he climbed back onto the trembling horse, turned its head east, and rode deeper into the forest. Toward the next safe barn, the next terrified mother, the next impossible mile. Behind him, the bridge creaked in the wind like a broken bone. And somewhere in the ravine below, a minister's promise floated on black water, waiting to be kept. Dawn over Dunlow bled gold across the square, but the scaffold cut the light into harsh bars and deeper shadows. The oak still bore rope burns from 6 months ago. Its bark had grown over some of the scars, leaving pale ridges like healed knife wounds. Caleb Aldridge stood at the foot of the steps, boots planted in the same mud where he had once knelt for death. The crowd pressed close. Hundreds this time, breath steaming in the chill, eyes bright with anticipation of justice. On the platform waited a single noose, new rope coiled like a serpent. Beneath it stood Rowan, hands bound, lips split, eyes ringed with sleepless bruises. The traitor's fine cloak had been stripped to a threadbare tunic. The king's hawk badge that once pinned his collar now lay in the dirt, snapped in two. Caleb felt the weight of every gaze. 6 months ago they had watched him tremble. Today they waited for him to wield the power he had earned mile by mile, name by name. 43 souls now slept in safety beyond the border because of ledgers smuggled in the hollow of a wooden cross. That cross hung against his chest now, warm from his skin, its crack mended with a thin seam of silver. A gift from a blacksmith in the last safe barn who had sworn it was stronger at the break. The captain of the guard stepped forward, scroll in hand. By writ of the crown, Rowan of Dunlow is sentenced to hang for treason, conspiracy, and the murder of Father Elias. A low murmur rippled through the crowd. Caleb raised one hand. Silence fell so complete he heard the creak of the scaffold ropes in the wind. I speak for the crown today, he said, voice steady, carrying to the furthest edges of the square. I speak also for the man who once saved me from this very platform. Rowan's head snapped up. Shock flickered across his features. Then something rawer. Fear, but also a dawning recognition of the scaffold's symmetry. Caleb climbed the steps slowly. Each board groaned beneath his weight, a reminder of Elias's blood, soaking these planks 6 months past. He stopped beside Rowan, close enough to smell sweat and iron shackles. From his pocket he drew the small wooden cross. Morning light caught the silver seam. The crack had become a vein of light. He held it so the crowd could see. This cross once belonged to a minister who believed mercy was a debt we pay forward. Today I settle that debt. A collective inhale swept the square. Caleb turned to Rowan. You betrayed him for coin. You cost him his life and you cost these people their shepherd. By every law of man and God, you should hang. Rowan's throat worked. No sound came. Caleb drew a small iron key from his belt, the same key that had opened every cell door from here to the border. He lifted it between them, metal glinting like a second sunrise. But I learned on the road that chains forged by fear can be broken by courage. The crown grants me authority to commute this sentence, on one condition. Rowan's eyes widened. You will serve the same cause Elias died for. You will carry messages, guide families, stand watch on bridges you once sold to the king. One betrayal, and the noose will find you again. A ripple of disbelief passed through the crowd. Someone shouted, "He deserves to swing." Others muttered agreement, anger rising like a tide. Caleb faced them. Justice is not always a rope. Sometimes it is a road you walk barefoot until your feet bleed, until you understand the weight of every step you once sold cheap. He stepped aside, gestured to the guards. The shackles clattered open. Rowan stumbled, caught himself on the scaffold rail, knuckles white. From the front row a woman stepped forward. Mara the baker, flour still dusting her sleeves. She held a small cloth bundle. Inside lay 3 loaves, still warm. She pressed them into Rowan's trembling hands. "Eat, traitor," she said, voice rough. "You'll need strength for the journey ahead." Another villager, Willem the Cooper, offered a stout walking staff. Then a child, no older than 8, tugged at Rowan's sleeve and placed a single daisy in his palm. No one cheered. The silence was heavier than any roar. Caleb descended the steps, the crowd parting before him like water. Rowan followed, barefoot now, the daisy crushed against the staff. Behind them the scaffold stood empty, rope swaying in a wind that smelled of new bread and fresh sawdust. At the edge of the square Caleb stopped, turned once more to the crowd. He raised the wooden cross high. "Every mercy given is a debt owed to the world. Today we choose to be paid in miles walked, not lives taken." A single horse waited, bay coat dappled with morning light. Caleb swung into the saddle, offered a hand. Rowan hesitated, then grasped it, awkward and grateful. The mare stepped forward, hooves ringing on cobblestones. As they passed beneath the oak, Caleb reached up and touched the rope burn in the bark. The bark was cool, healing. He felt Elias there, not as ghost, but as weight behind his ribs, steady as the cross against his heart. They rode out of Dunlow slowly, the crowd following to the last house, to the last child waving from a doorstep. When the village disappeared behind a bend, Caleb loosened the reins. Rowan clung to the staff, daisy petals scattering like confetti across the road. Behind them the scaffold remained, but the noose was gone, cut down and fed to the forge fires that night. Some said the ashes were mixed into the mortar of a new bridge. Others claimed the rope was woven into the church bell rope, so every Sunday the town would remember what had almost happened, and what had not. Caleb didn't look back. Ahead lay another list. Names written in invisible ink, roads still muddy with spring rain, mothers clutching children in cellars. He touched the cross seam, felt the faint warmth of Elias's blood still trapped in the grain. Hoofbeats faded into the morning, carrying 2 silhouettes across the open plain. One who had survived death, one who had survived betrayal, both now bound to the same impossible road. Somewhere behind them the church bell tolled, not for an execution, but for a beginning.